It was an exciting read and I enjoyed it. I love history. I love a good story. This was a great twist of both. You step off the ship dreaming of sunshine and opportunity, but instead you face snakes, spiders, scorching heat, and deeper than that, confront prejudice, injustice, and the question of where you truly belong.
You are watching Influence Media, PSI TV, the Netflix of biz brands.
Paul Rushworth Brown is an award-winning Australian author, educator, and former professional footballer, known for his evocative historical fiction and allegorical storytelling. Paul's contribution to literature and education were recognized with an NSW Premier Award, and his novels are praised for blending adventure with deep cultural insight. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks, Trudy. Thanks for
Thanks for
having
being
me.
my guest today. So, wow, sales for Outback Odyssey seem to be gaining international attention, but not so much back at home. And I don't know, why do you think that is? I mean, the Bible says a prophet has no honor in his own hometown. And while that principle may apply here, does it bother you not to have support from the very country featured in this book?
No, not really. I think it's just a matter of a matter of time because the novel actually touches on some very I think sensitive things for Australians. It's allegorical, so there's two layers to it. The sort of like the top layer is a historical fiction adventure type story, romance, but underneath that there's a number of allegorical themes that basically ask Australians to think about certain important things in our culture and obviously in First Nations culture.
Mm. So, Paul, you introduce challenges and sometimes taboo conversations in this book. Outback Odyssey had bigamy, the broken soldier, racial tension of the marginalized Aborigines, and injustice, but it's in a fictional tale. But in fact, this Odyssey explores themes of identity erasure and cultural legacy, often used an allegory to hold a mirror to contemporary Australia. Would you say you're a bit of a rebel, an activist at heart, or is this just an outlet for creativity that challenges the societal status quo?
Look, I'm not an advocate. I can't say that I speak for First Nations people. Um, but what I do is I tell a story which hopefully gets people to think about certain aspects with regard to First Nations. And it would resonate not only with Australian First Nations people, but also with obviously any First Nations people that have been colonized.
Now, you
But
use
in
the
answer,
phrase First Nation people. That's not a common phrase here in the United States. So you're referring to the Aborigines, like how we
yeah,
would
we
have
don't.
the Native Indians here?
Yeah, we don't use that word anymore, Aborigines. We don't even use the word indigenous. We use non-indigenous, but if we refer um, f to sort of like the original uh, inhabitants of Australia, out of respect, we use the term First Nations.
Oh, very good to know. Very good to know. All right. Well, um, so Paul, what is your writing process? Did you use the help of AI? Did this book take years? Did you have an outline before you started, or did you just jump right in and the story just pour right out of you?
Um, Look, this is my fourth historical fiction novel, and I always wanted to write a novel based on Australiana, and it's been very, very popular in America because it really gives a really good, um, I suppose, um, it presents an atmosphere of what it's like in the Australian bush and what it's like in Australia and that type of thing. But with regard to my writing process, I don't have one. All I basically when I write, it's just like a movie going taking place in front of my eyes, and all I do is just transfer that that down onto paper. But yeah, in answer to your question, Yeah, I just write, and I don't plan anything. And most importantly, I wanted this fourth um, novel to actually mean something. Uh, and if you sort of like read it at face value, as I said, it would just be sort of like a historical adventure romance story. But if you can sort of like look underneath that, there's a lot of allegorical concepts. But they're actually calling it the Australian To Kill a Mockingbird over
Mm.
here.
Yeah, you said romance, and your protagonist Jimmy, he's quite the ladies' man in this book. So anyway, what inspired you? Well, you did say that you wanted this book to be very important. So were you inspired in any way? Any of your characters were they developed from real people that you actually know?
Yeah, the Jimmy, the main protagonist, he's actually very loosely based on my father, who came over to Australia back in the 50s as a 10-pound pom. And the other people basically just from my imagination, but obviously there was with regard to First Nations people, I did a lot of research, and I've spent quite a lot of time out in the outback, worked out there, lived out there. So yeah, they're sort of like I suppose a conglomeration of people that I've met.
Mm. So the word Odyssey kind of reminds me of Homer's epic poem. And the word Odyssey implies more than just physical travel. It also even suggests an epic journey of growth and transformation. I think I did see that in your characters. In what ways, though, is the Outback Odyssey maybe a metaphorical journey as much as a geographical one?
Good question. Well, Jimmy actually spent 12 years of his early life in an orphanage because his parents died when he was about 12. And then when he turned 18, he left the orphanage, tried to get into the military, wasn't accepted. Coming to Australia was his plan B. And and so leaving the place of his birth, leaving I suppose, his parents. He didn't feel as if he belonged anywhere. So there's that whole sort of idea of belonging. And even when he got to Australia, he's in this huge country, didn't know anything about it. He was shipped out to the outback to work on a sheep station, and didn't have any sense of being grounded or belonging. He was just in the middle of nothing. And I suppose over time, First Nations elder called Jarrah takes him under his wing and eventually teaches him how to belong in the bush, and how to survive in the bush, and how to I suppose to just feel as if he's part of it.
Yeah, and I, I I found this quote in your book. I thought that it summarized the book, in my opinion. And the quote is, "This is a story of the resilience of a people, a nation, and a generation. Resilience born and lost of a past that will not let go, and of a future that was waiting to be created." So, Paul, Jimmy immigrates to Australia. And for my viewers who have never been there before, my cousins, by the way, are from Australia, but I've never been there. So I can resonate personally with the conversations that Jimmy had about going to a new world and to where he was expecting to see bikini clad women, sharks, snakes, and spiders. Now, I assumed when I started reading this book, I said, "Are you from Australia or been to Australia? What is Australia really like? And does everything really want to eat you
Uh, yeah. Um, Look, uh, Australia is obviously a wonderful place, and totally different to what people that don't live here expect. Um, it's very if to go out into the bush is just it's a lifetime experience. just the quiet and the I remember one year I actually, this is going back a few years now, you can't do it now, but I actually camped at the base of Uluru, which is what you'd probably refer to as like a big monolith in the middle of Australia. And there was First Nations corroboree going on in the background, miles away, because there's nothing around. The sound travels so far. Um, and just sort of like laying there in my swag, looking up at the stars that were sort of like right there, miles and miles and miles from anywhere. Yeah, it was a very spiritual experience. But um, I mean, Australia is one of the things that I wanted for people to know is that feeling about being out in the bush and the way people survive in the bush. I mean, I used to work as a navvy, um, traveling along through the outbacks, like replacing sleepers on train tracks. And obviously it was it could be up to 42 degrees. I think that's over 100 Fahrenheit for you guys, and you're sort of like working in that all day. And there's flies, and there's obviously brown snakes and that type of thing. So um, one of the most important things for me, and a previous interviewer actually just said to me that she just finished the novel, and she said, "Look, great characters, great story," but she was American as well. She said, "But the thing I loved about Outback Odyssey was the fact that I learned so much about Australia."
Yeah.
And just sort of like those, I suppose those cultural things, um, First Nations cultural things, and how and the wisdom and the tapestry of Aboriginal people and their mobs, and some of the I suppose the cultural. I mean, Australia wasn't just one nation of Aboriginal people.
I
Australia was
think you
made
said
up
there's
of,
like 50 tribes or something like that.
oh, more than that, and every one had a boundary. Every one had their own culture, their own language. There might have been 1,000, right? And each one of those, and we call it the country, and each one of those countries had um, obviously their own head of mob. And if you wanted to cross into one of those countries, you had to ask for permission. So there's a lot of, I suppose, knowledge to be gained about Australia through that.
Mm. So you have the country we know as Australia, but the First Nation people were in these mobs and they were like little countries.
Yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. So because I'm American, my audience is primarily American. What is a 10-pound pom?
Okay. So 10-pound pom, back in the 50s, Australia had an all white um, law, right? And they wanted to keep Australia British. So what they wanted to do is get as many British people over to Australia as possible. So what they did is they offered Scottish, Irish, English people, if you come to Australia, all you have to do is pay £10, which is $20 or whatever, and we'll pay for your boat fare over here. We'll give you a place to live. We'll find you a job. The only requirement is that you must stay here for 2 years. If you don't
Mm,
stay here for 2 years, then you have to pay the £200 or whatever it was, to for your fare back to England.
mm.
So a pom is basically an Australian slang word for English, because
Ah,
um, it was basically, there's a lot of sort of like myths how the word pom came up, but one of those myths was that when Captain Cook came over here, they ate pomegranates to keep scurvy away. Another one is a person of Her Majesty's um, service, in other words, a prisoner. So there's a lot of myths about that. Nobody really knows, but that's what a 10-pound pom is.
ah. So I'm from Jamaica, so I understand the game called cricket. But again, for my mostly American audience, can you just give us a quick overview of cricket, the game cricket, which is mentioned in the book?
Oh, goodness me. If you don't, it's actually quite a complicated game
I would
or
say
sport.
it's kind of like over here they have a game called baseball.
Yeah, I know baseball.
Yeah,
It's very,
it would be
very,
the
very
closest.
different.
It is
The
very different, but for the American perspective, a bat, a ball, people out in the field throwing you, catching.
Yes,
Just
yes.
I just wanted because when you
Yeah,
read
look. If you keep it sort of like at a layman's level like that, yeah, very similar to baseball. Um, let's just leave it at that
but for
because it's
us,
very
it's a
technical.
big deal because
Yeah,
Jamaica plays Australia all the time. It's a big
yeah,
deal for us, right? So yeah,
yeah,
it's a big
yeah,
game. And over here they call football what we call soccer. So it's the culture is coming up. And so when someone reads your book, they are learning about Australia. They're learning about the bush. They're learning
yeah,
words that we don't use here, and so I wanted to
yeah.
explore that for them. So Paul, Durrari walks Jimmy through a history lesson on the land of the people, and this is still historical fiction. But how much research went into your preparation versus the creative freedom you took to write the historical aspects of this book?
An enormous amount of research, mainly based on uh, sort of like historical um, uh, papers from sort of like the 1800s. And but the most important thing was for me to be very, very respectful with regard to First Nations culture. So that was paramount to me. And really, the novel is a celebration to in certain aspects of First Nations culture, their wisdom. I mean, they've been living here for 60,000 years, and we don't know sort of like one tenth of what the knowledge that they have. Um, but with regard to uh, research, I mean, a lot of it, some of it came from stories that my father told me of working with Aboriginal stockmen out in the outback. A lot of it came from sort of like my experiences of working out in the outback. But yeah, a lot of those things that are brought up about the land. I mean, the land is sort of like it's in the novel. The land is actually a character.
Yes,
Um,
it's a living organism in
yeah,
your book.
yeah.
By the way, have any of the First Nation people read your book and given you any kind of feedback?
Well, it only came out in June,
Okay, so
so so there's I'm actually in the process of meeting with the Indigenous Literacy um, Association and actually organizing for some of the proceeds from the book to actually go to First Nations literacy projects.
oh, that's
And yeah, look, a lot of there's reconciliation groups in Australia of both white and Aboriginal people that are basically fighting for there to be more reconciliation and looking at sovereignty of First Nations people and basically agreeing that they are the owners of the land and all that type of thing, which, as you can imagine, can be quite contentious sometimes. But
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Which also someone in your country reading your book and looking at you being a white man, they are going to probably wonder what side are you really on. I can see where your book is going to create its own little tension over there for you
yeah.
in your
Yeah,
country.
yeah, yeah. It's very there's a lot of discussion about it. And yeah, I mean one of the main things that I wanted to come from the book was that people um even though it's a great story and great characters and that it asks questions of people. And quite often that can resonate with Americans and you know um you know Black Lives Matter and that type of thing as well.
So as I was reading the book, you write it in your vernacular. I mean, I literally sometimes I try reading it out loud, and I felt like I was sounding Aussie in what I
Yeah.
was reading it. But I have to ask you, what in the world is Ngani Kiliakuru Nijanun Burda? You have a
Oh,
phrase.
so I didn't. Well, it's actually First Nations language. right?
Okay.
But because I didn't want to, I suppose, I didn't want to use real First Nations language, but I wanted it to resonate and sound like it was even the mob that is mentioned in the novel is actually fictitious.
Fictional. Okay.
Yeah. But just the way it's spoken and the way it comes across on the page, um, I wanted there to be, some sort of language in there that sounds like uh, a First Nations language.
It also acknowledges that they are there, but they are unique to the culture and to the place.
Yeah. Well, the most important thing is was that in a lot of novels, the first and even a lot of the movies in that about Australia, First Nations people are usually in the margins, whereas in this novel they're actually a
The
very
main,
very
yeah, very
main
prominent. Yeah.
integral part of the story.
So there is a relationship between Amanda, Jimmy, and Derek. It leads to a plot twist that takes them into the legal arena. Um, I don't know if it had anything to do with Amanda being half Dutch to justify her rights to be Australian. What was the deal there without giving away too much of the story?
Um, well, there's a subplot in the novel, and it revolves around Wyberg's gold, which is a real thing. Martin Wyberg was a basically a thief back in the 1800s, and he was on a ship taking some Colombian sovereigns to Melbourne to be transferred back to Colombia, and they'd be worth sort of like $3-4 million today. Anyway, because he was a carpenter, he broke into the strong box, took the gold out and replaced it with pig lead, and then he disappeared into the bush. And they found some of the sovereigns, but not all of them. And even today, down in Victoria, there's still people looking for the rest of these sovereigns. So that's a little subplot yeah. Yeah, I'm just being careful not to sort of like
Right, right, right.
say too much.
So there is a native Aboriginal ritual that Jimmy experiences. Is there any significance to that?
Oh, huge significance. Um, I suppose I can say this is the significance is, and it's all tied to that idea of belonging because he didn't feel like he belonged anywhere. And obviously, there's that romance story, but also Amanda, because her mother left when she was quite young. Amanda, the main strong female character in the novel, actually is brought up by a surrogate mother who is First Nations. So the First Nations people living on her land are very, very important to her. Um, and because her uncle is, as you mentioned, uh, that's probably the main antagonist. He wants her station, and the only way that she can keep her station is by her and Jimmy and Durari finding this Wyberg's gold.
Mm,
But yeah, there's a very different ending that I'm not going to go
yeah,
into.
right, right, right.
Um, but that
So
ending is, sorry, go on.
no, no, no. I felt like you did a lot of justice to the First Nation people, their land. It was a living, breathing thing. And I got the feeling that you were also implying a human responsibility to the environment. So what did you mean by the land remembers?
Well, as I mentioned before, the land is actually a character, and I suppose quite often non-Indigenous people um, they obviously the First Nations people are quite marginalized, and they had a real tough time of it. So like back in the 1800s, as most Indigenous people did around the world, um, and I suppose the metaphor was that you know non-Indigenous people might forget about all that, but the land always remembers. And because First Nations people are so um, attached to the land, I mean, that land remembers what they've been through and where where they are and who they are. And there's very, very, I suppose, not getting too deep, but sort of like latches on to things about the spirit of the land and that type of thing.
So this book ends with a promise of sorts. It ends with to be continued. That's
Yeah,
literally the book, to be
yeah.
continued. So what else do we have to look forward to from you?
Um, Look, I've got a couple of other historical um, novels racing around up here. Um, so, another author asked me if there was going to be another one, and my answer to that was, or was I going to continue the story? And um, it'd be, I'd like to sort of like continue the story, but it depends on how the public
Response to this one.
accepts and responds to this one. And if you're the person that likes, or if you're a reader that likes uh, novels that are dual layered and have that symbolism, that doesn't. I mean, I never preach. I just tell a story. And if you're the type of reader that likes that symbolism, and if you like to sort of like if you like twists and turns, then it would resonate with them. But with regard to, yeah, in answer to your question, with regard to, let's wait and see.
Well, Paul Rushworth Brown, it has been my pleasure to have you on PSI TV today. And ladies and gentlemen, you do want to go and check this book out, and you can find it at paulrushworthbrown.com. I will put that link in the end credits for you so you don't spell it wrong. And you can also find the book on Amazon and your favorite bookstore. It's not the Outback Odyssey, guys, so be careful. Look for Outback Odyssey by Paul Rushworth Brown. It was an exciting read and I enjoyed it. I love history. I love a good story. This was a great twist of both. And you learn about, if you've never been to Australia, you've never been to the bush, you will be enlightened. So, Paul, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thanks, Trudy.